Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Kristina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Kristina Schmitt. So I have a very exciting thing that I've been wanting to do for a very long time and share with you. So I have Kelly Rude and Holly Leonard from CCO, and they are, if you don't know what CCO is, I'm going to let them explain it, but it's Catholic Christian Outreach. But what I'm going to have them share with you today is what the culture there looks like, because I talk so much around leadership and how that builds our good culture and how that's going to give us better results and better outcomes, better lives at home as well. I want to show you what good looks like. They've had such a unique experience working for this organization, and I am going to just have them share that with you and explore it so you can see what good looks like, what having this kind of culture and building your leadership up in this way can do for you, and what kind of outcomes you can get. So Kelly and Holly, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
It's nice to be with you, Kristina.
Nice to be with you too. I'm going to give you a second to introduce yourselves and just tell us a little bit about you and what you do with CCO. So Holly, you want to go first?
Sure. So my name's Holly. I'm married. I'm a mom of 4. I am the director of formation with Catholic Christian Outreach. And our movement, I'll just share our mission statement just really briefly, is committed to raising up Christ-centered, spirit-filled leaders to evangelize the world one person at a time. So my eyes are dodging to read it because it's new and refreshed. We have our roots in a campus movement, and I was reached by CCO as a university student. So I've been a missionary full-time for 20 years, and this is my current role as director of formation.
Thanks, Holly. Kelly?
Okay, something fun about Holly and I is we've been friends for a long time, and everyone switches our names. When we work together, friend together, I don't know why it happened.
So it wasn't just...
It just wasn't you. So be at peace. I've been a missionary now for 20 plus years. My husband's a missionary as well, a missionary family. I come from the business world, and then I encountered CCO graduating in my 5th year of university from a finance accounting major. And I had some corporate experience already for the last 5 years. And when I got touched by an organization that it was devoted to leadership, I just got so excited because I had already had a taste of the corporate world, and I had everything I'd aspired to, I had met. And I was so young, but it wasn't feeding my heart. Already I saw the trajectory of what that life would look like, and it was very empty. Same thing with my husband. He was offered partner in an accounting firm, and shortly after encountered a relationship with Jesus, and that changed his trajectory. So here we are 20 plus years later, and love the movement because it's a movement dedicated towards making people the best they can be through a relationship with Christ, but then also through leadership excellence. So the two go hand in hand. Leadership is the catalyst for that relationship with Jesus to spread. So yeah, we're
So awesome.
Very purposeful.
Yeah.
Living life to the fullest, living the dream.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So can I digress into what you just mentioned there for a second, Kelly? You talked about how CCO, because of the mission, has such a wonderful thing. Do you think the culture could be possible in a secular industry? Because obviously everybody there has something pulling them together with the mission of CCO. Do you think it's possible?
Yeah, so just to reflect back, so can the leadership culture be possible in corporate or secular world? Yes, because everything we learn from comes from secular and leadership cultures. Like if it's Patrick Lencioni to Michael Hyatt to Stephen Covey to John Maxwell, from good to great Jim Collins, the list goes on. I think what makes us different in that is we're devoted by mission, our desire to see people become the best they can be and to see the organization become the best it can be to reach more people. When we've had consultants come in, that's one thing they comment on immediately is how dedicated each one of our staff are to see the mission fulfilled. So we're not there for money. We left that world. We're there because we believe in what can be, and that drives our leadership excellence. Now, having said that, is everyone super on board reading books all the time? No, because that's just the human condition, right? Taking time for leadership development is it's a choice, and we always have to choose between like, what's good and what's great. But are we all in it to become better? Yes. Are we all in it to become fully alive? Yes. And thankfully, we have multiple levels of leaders now in our organization that are being witnesses and mentors and accompanying other people in that culture. And then the organization also spends time separately giving that space to people to grow or grow.
So amazing. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
I had to digress a bit because I do get that question quite a bit because I lead a lot of secular, I teach a lot of leadership for secular, but I also am forming some Catholic leader groups because there is another level in there. And I've been able to speak to some other organizations where they're faith-filled people working in a secular industry. And there is a difference. There's a difference there, but the mission doesn't have to be, we can get excited about the mission. It can be underlying, it can be sharing Christ, but it can still be like creating a positive workplace culture. It can be building widgets, and we can still keep that underlying faith-filled mission that these widgets are going to, or this work that we do is going to provide for people, which then provides for their spiritual well-being and everything else. So Thank you. I think it is possible. And I just wanted to hear someone else say it because I think people get tired of me telling it all the time.
Yeah. And just Holly and I often say it, but leadership is possible because even to the church world, they would say, well, we can't do that because we don't have the leadership background or we don't have the business background. And our response, I think, back would be the leadership skills are the catalyst. So even if you pick up one little knowledge piece, like how to run a great meeting or how to run a good church meeting or how to mobilize people, that can, like, one knowledge piece can explode your results or, help you move people. And then to the moms and dads, like, leadership goes into family. Like, if I didn't have good mentors in the beginning, in my early 20s, before life got crazy with kids, and I think Hall would say the same, that it has helped us in how we shape our Sunday nights and how we're intentional with our kids and our yeses and nos in family life. But it's all those principles that are playing out now when life is moving past pace.
Yeah, like I like that angle, Kristina, because it's, to me, the win of, if you find a young leader, like secular or in the church, I think what we're asking them is to step into something countercultural. It's stepping into the examined life, stepping into a life that believes that leading yourself first, working on your own character, and even just stopping to examine where you're not at relative to any leadership skill is like the best way to win at your job, in your career, or in the mission in front of you. And that is countercultural, like to pause. Yes, there's mindfulness and that's out there, but actually leadership is coming even more narrow and saying, yeah, but when do you wake up and what do you do first and how do you organize yourself and what do you say yes and no to? And it's kind of making the argument that if you really want to be effective and rise and be selected, you need to examine yourself. And in our movement, kind of like Kelly's saying, when I was hired and coming in, that economy was revealed to me very quickly. Like, if you want to win here, and meaning for us, it was proclaiming the gospel to more people and have more people reached, you need to dive right away first into leading yourself. And into examining where you're not at in your character and your performance. And it's like, whoa, we're going to begin there. Like, shouldn't we do more stuff? Shouldn't we work harder and longer hours? Well, not yet. Like maybe later there'll be those seasons. And it just kind of, it felt like someone was stopping me to go slower, but so that we could go quicker later.
Which is so amazing. I know my background was not that at all. Like, to some extent it was. Like I was learning leadership skills very early on in my career, but that pause on myself didn't get really profound for me until I started doing it on my own. And I always say it was my reversion back to my Catholic faith that really spirited that. Also having children spirited that because I wanted better for them. I wanted them to have a deep relationship. And I said, well, if they're going to, I better have to, because I can't teach them how to do it without doing it first. So it was, but that has helped me be able to really get into my niche, figure out what I want to do, and share that with the world too. So It is amazing. And it's a step that it's hard to take. It's hard to take when you want to go fast. Like, especially you're new, you're young, you're an entrepreneur, you're a business, you're in the hustle mode. And now you've got to stop and pause and figure out how you function, what works, what doesn't.
Yeah. And you need people around you, right? Like witnessing to that, and like leaders and courses and mentorship help you see those principles lived out in others and start to cast a vision for what's possible. Because I think reading the books and being a self-learner can get us a certain distance, but surrounding ourselves with people who can help us see where that can be implemented and how it can change what we're up to, watching how they're living it. Again, we're so privileged around here to not just hear people preaching to us principles and telling us standards, but we could see lives of order, lives of fruitfulness, lives where like prayer mattered, daily prayer was not compromised. You know, yes, there's children and illness, but like you could see that they were shaping their lives according to the things they were saying.
Yeah.
And it was not dissonant. It was actually like very clear. And there was an icon of that they were doing what they were saying to us to do. Which I know as parents, it's like not always the way, but in terms of the leadership that was modeled, we were like, okay, they'd say things, you know, like big rocks in your work week and in your year, and this is how you do it. And you'd look at them and go, now I get how you have 8 children and run this massive movement. It's because you literally live by this.
Yeah.
We were doing like roles and goals, Hey Kel worksheets. Like, remember the old roles and goals? We had these little binders and these things they'd print off for us. And boom, like right away, Sunday night, you were supposed to write down the 10 roles you had, like coming, you know, your relationship with your parents, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with God, and make a goal, measure it. You know, I know Hyatt now we're doing the full focus and stuff, but I remember as a baby doing those things.
Yeah.
And you might look at my life and go, okay, she was leading like 20 women in small group faith studies, but we were doing roles and goals on Sunday nights.
And now that set the foundation. Like, it's crazy. Yeah. And mission statements, we're like, what is your mission statement? So we had our mission statements printed everywhere. And then you're like trying to lead out of that. At the time, it just was fun. But now, 20 years later, you're like, holy man, that was critical in my development and of who I am and who I'm not. Especially as you see people around you and they're like, how do you know who you are so well? How do you say yes and no? You're like, well, I have this. And they're like, say what? What do you have?
So I want to ask, because I've been part of companies and worked with companies that they do these things, but they don't stick. So what was like the process? What did it look like to do these roles and goals journals and have your mission statement out there and have it be more than just wallpaper? Like, what did that look like?
I think it was the people. I think we both have different experiences because Holly was on campus, I was in the office. But it's like in examining 20 years later, what was working well for us and what can we do to keep multiplying that into our people? Hall and I have done different surveys and tried to understand people. I think one of the biggest indicators was the people leading us. Like, I don't think so much it was the paper per se or what was up. It was we were captured by the leaders above us. And it wasn't even like they were our bosses. It was who they were. Like, they were being solicited out like externally for their leadership, for their exemplary leadership. And when you had people of that and they were inspiring you, like they weren't saying you need to read this book. They're like, here's a book to read. And you wanted to read it because you want to be like them. Or you wanted, and even not necessarily like I want to copy them. They were so attractive in how their life was led that you wanted a piece of that, and you were willing to put the time in, and they were willing to put the time into you. So they would host things like leadership lunches, or they early on they started something called it was like a leadership retreat for all our staff, and we would have leadership challenges once a year off site. And for 3 days, we would be given a book and we would be given leadership case studies. And we were young, but we were all excited. We're broken in teams and we would stay up and we're doing it. But we were so fired up to be together and to be invested. And now you look and you're like, wow, that was a big gift we were given. And but we weren't there for work. We were there for work, but we weren't there for work. Like, it's kind of like when you have kids now and you're like, if you teach them how to do things and they're not having fun, they're not going to do it. But when they are having fun, we're going to do it. We were all having fun. Like, the leadership culture was so high that you just want to be a part of it because of the people around you leading it.
Yeah, I think it was the people. I think their strategy too, like, and their, like,
Yes,
like
is
the
intentionality for
repetition
sure.
and their intentional strategy. So just to list some things, there'd be like, there was thematic goals and there was ways that was going to impact the senior leadership. There was ways that was going to impact our current operations, how our teams functioned, and then what we were individually, and it was communicated to us. We even got little laminated things, and it'd go in my Bible. Like, I knew this year, this is what God is calling us to reform or to change or to adjust. And I think one year it was like, whatever, like internally strengthening the movement. And what that meant was like this. And they would agree upon those things, communicate them, and then measure them. Like every week, we would get emailed Excel sheets, attachments. You'd open your Excel, enter in what you did, email it up. And somehow this is like before Google Sheets and stuff. And they were tracking how I had fulfilled on my little level or on my team level these goals. And they would report on it and celebrate and reward things. This is before like 6 sources of influence. We would have later learned about those things, but they did Global Leadership Summit. Like, they would give away tickets. That was a reward for other good performance. You'd get a ticket to go to this, and you'd go, sometimes to Chicago or sometimes to a remote site. You just felt like you had to come back and make a presentation. That's the deal. You had to present to others what you learned. And because we were a dynamic movement, and because it's so hard to stay, to fundraise your salary, you end up having a lot of people who are very opinionated, and our organization is full of people with opinions on how things can be done better. Well, they leveraged that. So they had a special week where you could come and solve the movement's problems. They would pick the top 5 problems. You broke out into teams and you were allowed to propose solutions to the senior leaders who are obviously managing these things. But at the time, remote work was exploding. This is like 15 to 18 years ago. It was, should we or shouldn't we allow it? And how should we look at it? I remember them making me read a Harvard Business Review. I didn't even know what those were. I had to order it, read it, look at what the findings were, talk about how that was going to impact us, present to the senior leaders. I'm like 22, 23 years old, and I don't understand the scope of anything. I don't know what's my lane, what's the lane for the board of directors. I'm just like all over the place. But what they were doing is growing in us the capacity to consider bigger than our territory and allowing us in the room to make solutions. So we had statements in our culture like, let the youngest speak, meaning they would always welcome like a brand new person giving a recommendation to senior. It was, the door is open to the president, to the founder. They actually have margin in their calendars and now Calendly links where you can meet. So these were like all a part of this aquarium that we're swimming in. And like Kelly's saying, the things we read and did at lunches were really a part of our life. They were thorough, like virtuous leaders. So it made it easy for us to grow up in that environment. It wasn't like fake or facade.
And I think that's the key part there, is that it was authentic, and you could tell it wasn't just the thing that they were trying to do to make you do it, but they were doing it too.
Yeah.
And they'd found a way to give you mentorship by doing the things. And that's what really, that's what makes it stick, is that those leaders are doing it for real, and they authentically are trying to trickle it to the whole team so that everyone is doing it.
And when you ask them, we've asked them, like, how did you handle us? Like, we were so, arrogant or young or just crazy. Like, and they would tell you, like, they had their own exercise of trust. Like, did they really mean what they said? Like, they had to, they're giving me 60 minutes of their time. They're trusting that I'm coming prepared, that I have a problem, that I have solutions to propose. Like, they have to trust that, I'm really going to do what I said. And they really have to give me that leash that they said they'd give me. Like, there's their side of the story too. That would have been challenging. They would have right-sized all of that according to what they had margin for. But it was very like, these are like dads of like 6, 7, 8 kids. And we are like in our 20s and we are like right under them in management. And it's just, I'm embarrassed with some of the stuff that I was writing proposals and disagreeing and doing this. But in the meanwhile, they're watching us grow and think and solve and own. We later bump into, what's the red and black book, Kel? That extreme ownership with
Jocko Willink.
So now that's everywhere, because we're like, that's the language for the stuff we do here. Okay, so we've cascaded kind of that vocabulary, leading up, leading down, cover and move.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it resonates. So the more language we get, the easier transferring these concepts has become.
Yes, definitely. And then it's common language. So like, is it that some book would come out and everybody was reading it?
Totally.
Right.
So we have that problem. I would say that's the downside is we are very like, okay, like we're all into, good to great, or, Bill Hybels with the A to B, like, right, Kel, like the moving the people across the promised land. Like we would have these seasons of new vocabulary and we get teased about that because it comes to the whole culture. So right now we're all into Leif, Babin, and extreme ownership. And everywhere you go, someone's like, okay, that's a cover and move. Okay, that's a lead up. Okay, that's a lead down. Like that's everywhere right now. We read and we were listening to podcasts the other day too from Les McEwen about predictable success. So now that's everywhere. Everyone's talking about predictable success. You would laugh watching us through the window. Like, you guys are crazy, but it does. The common language and the spreading of a concept as it applies to us solving a problem or something we perceive to be a threat to the mission, people get around it really quick, and they want to know that language too, and they want to read that book too and understand it in their way.
I think just for background too, we're like, our movement isn't made up of business and MBAs. Like, we're a bunch of people that grew up in the movement or have come in mid-career and had engineering backgrounds or kinesiology backgrounds or political science, right? So these concepts really are, we take them and then they learn from them, but it's a concept called just-in-time learning. I think, like, if you were to try a teaching model to it, like, the concept sticks because it's connecting with the tension we have in the movement, teaching us a go-to, and then off we go. So we're not theoretical thinkers, we're real-time, on the ground thinkers and executors and strategists. Like, not reactionary, but can also take a concept and apply it quite quickly to get us to where we need to go. Yeah, and pride really is at the side of the table. Like, it doesn't take a big. We all have opinions because we're opinionated, but we're also, like, because it's for the gospel, the pride sits at the door. If it's going to get us somewhere faster, then we're open to that. And unity is something that matters in our organization. So it's a concept called Subornos from Catherine Doherty or Madonna House, but we have to have a unity before we could move anywhere. And it's not like, I'll pay you, I'll buy you a coffee for you to agree, or I'll take you out for lunch if you say yes. It's like, no, we have to feel deep in our hearts that we're in total agreement before we move forward.
Which is awesome. I talk a lot about a lot of Patrick Lencioni things, and he's got that conflict continuum. So how does conflict look? What does conflict look like there?
Yeah, we expect and we're to be prepared for conflict. So we come at it from learning about, like, our temperaments. We've also done, like, Alex Havard, like, just understanding, like, virtuous leadership and how that plays into our virtues. So there's, like, knowing how I handle conflict and understanding that we each handle it different, but there's an accountability to crucial conversations. So, like, I know there's always updated trainings on that, but I've heard that word for 20 years. And now there's, like, videos and stuff on it, but, like, I for sure have heard and been accountable to how am I going to behave when I'm feeling misunderstood or I don't agree, that I need to do it quickly, that I need to do it when I'm not as emotional about it. Like, there's all my little protocols and expected culturally that you would be having crucial conversations. So there'd be, like, a cultural expectation that if you're complaining about someone or something that happened to you, that colleague is going, when's your crucial? Like, when are you going to have, like, when, like, kind of, it's nice to hear you out and to hear the complaint, but when are you going to do something about it? Now, Kelly's talking, so that's in a one-on-one or one person inside of a meeting. The Subornos that Kelly's speaking about is more, how we work towards unity and how high of a priority unity is. So unity, like, we have language around disagree and commit, meaning I disagree, but I'm still willing to commit. That is a form of unity. There is that. But if you're not able to do that, the movement believes we'll go slower until we can go together. Like, if we still don't have unity about this expansion or this global project or this putting people in these places, and there's still this uncomfort in this one side of the organization, we're waiting. We're praying, we're waiting, we're forgiving, and we're being guided by that supernatural unity that only the Holy Spirit can provide. So that's how our faith plays into, like, God's providence in the yeses and nos. We really, really, it's modeled from above, and we live it all the way through the movement. We don't go unless everyone is comfortable at, like, relative levels of the yeses and nos.
Awesome. That's good. So I'm going to ask a question. It's going to come out weird, but all of this, like writing proposals for, ideas to improve, having your crucials, doing all of this stuff, it all takes time. So you have like the work and the mission that you're actually doing as well. So how much time would you say is spent on, it's essential stuff to get the team working, to get the best solution versus delivering what you normal places would call the duties of your role. What would you say that looks, or is it so intertwined that you don't even see it as a difference?
Depending on the level of leadership, I think there can be swings, but I'd say about 10% of the person's week is spent planning to have a crucial, having a crucial, planning to adapt something, or planning to seek unity in a meeting, working on themselves versus in the work, if you were to put it that way. We have an added piece of our work, which is working on our support team, which is 2 to 4 hours a week that we work on stabilizing our personal funding model, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about, so when you see our job descriptions, it's listed, answering emails it's called admin, right? Kel admin / support raising. And it's about 15% of the week, and it lists answering emails in 48 hours, making time for ad hoc conversations with colleagues, your personal planning. It's expected in the job description that you're working on yourself before delivering. And it shows really quickly if you're not. So it would come up in your performance assessment, or you'd start failing in some of the quarterly and annual pieces because you're not taking that personal time. And on top of it, CCO pays for us to have membership to some of those courses to take full focus, which works on your whole self, right? It's your work, but it's also your running goals or your whatever other personal goals you have.
Yeah. Health, wellness, leadership.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Because there's always I'm in the middle of doing a leadership program with the group right now. And they're the big comments at the end of each session is Kristina, this takes a lot of time. And I'm like, it does. And as a leader, there's a big portion of your job that is leading, and that is working on yourself and working with your team. And it's a forgotten thing in most companies and organizations. It's everyone thinks they have their job, and all these nice to do things are going to be on top of their job. And it's wonderful to hear that there are organizations that include that. Hey, your job is all of this.
That's right. And it bleeds over, it is how we behave. But because, in the last 15 years, we were telling you as well, with parish and diocesan and other external movements globally, the first thing they think they're coming to us for is, I want to do ministry like you guys. Help me adjust and integrate your nuances. And we do, but we also can't without identifying some of the needs for improvement in their leadership, in their personal leadership, their team structure, their meeting structure, the way they plan to report back to one another on their results, even identifying what a win looks like. These all quickly spill over because that's how we see winning. That's how we see effectiveness. And that reaction that you're getting, we also understand, and our answer is usually we can't afford to not spend this time. This mission and your results are so important that if we don't figure out what your week and your month and your year and how the team is going to share in winning together, if we can't get that figured out, even rudimentary, that you're all just doing a bunch of stuff, and we want to get away from doing activity into being intentional. So that spills over into how we accompany leaders and movements and parishes is identifying leaders, growing ourselves. It's a part of how we mission.
Mm-hmm.
And they say the same thing. How are we going to have time for this? I'm we don't have time not to. We need to.
I think, Kristina, too, it goes back to the human condition too. People, all of us, we tend towards the reactive and the crisis, and that it feels comfortable there because that's where culture is. That's where the world is. Things happen, something crashes, it feels good. You solve the issue of a quadrant one thing, you've solved it. It feels good. There's a little endorphin kick. But then the bigger things get left. So even at a very local level, a staff has to have an accountability conversation, but they also have to get a proposal out. That's real. So what did they choose? And sometimes, the bigger work gets chose, but then you have to prioritize. Okay, I'm saying no to this accountability conversation, but then I'm also saying no to the growth of this person. And at some point, that's going to catch up to me. So when am I going to do that? Because if I'm saying no to what I'm seeing now, then I call it the snowball effect. It just will get bigger and bigger. And then it's going to catch up at some point. So you have to decide and you have to prioritize, like looking against your mission. Where do I want my team to be, or where do I want, and which takes the higher priority? And sometimes you might have to choose the proposal, but then you don't ignore, you create a follow-up plan for like when that person is going to be addressed. Because nothing gets forgotten. It's just, what are you choosing to prioritize? And by saying yes, you're saying no to something else.
Mm-hmm.
But the crisis does feel good. And I think that's important for people, is responding in crisis does feel good, and responding to not crisis does not. The endorphins don't come till later.
And even if it's not crisis, right, the busyness of activity.
Busyness.
Well, but it's similar depending on the industry. And I think like modeling it and repeating it again, like Kelly says, it was modeled to us. Like it was celebrated too when we had a crucial convo. Like the boss the next week was like asking how it went and celebrating and reminding with us like the grandeur of how that is a great fitness for the mission. Like it might not look like another $5,000 contract or another 5,000 books sold, but they were valuating it for us and telling us like how much that mattered. And it being framed that way, like Kelly's little things that she's saying, come from stuff that was spoken over us.
Mm-hmm.
A what without a when is a never. Like an avoided conversation is a future conflict. Like these are things that we would have racing through our minds and go, and we have free will and we don't always choose it.
Yeah.
So fall into laziness or the temptation that it doesn't matter. But we're people of prayer and running a ministry of excellence. It will always come back to convict us, and we'll have the tools to take those steps. And we have people supporting and celebrating at every level.
That's awesome. So on top of it being in your job description, it's also practiced in real life. And what's important to the leader is tracked. And what's important to the leader becomes important to everybody else. And so by them giving that positive feedback that, hey, great job, how did it go? And asking about it, now it's become important to the leader. Yeah. And now therefore even more important to you. And so now you're rewarded to do it the next time.
Exactly.
It's just awesome.
Yeah.
So tell me about so how long has CCO been in existence? Like when did it get formed?
In 1988, Andre and Angèle Renier, like a newly married couple, founded our university-based ministry at that time. And that was at the University of Saskatchewan. Andre was a wrestler. Andre was a teacher's college graduate. And they printed the first kind of what would now be like our Faith Study series. And kind of, I think the most fascinating thing about our foundation day, and we always like delight in this, is they were married on October 15th, and the first Faith Study was run by 3 university students. So actually their very first day of existing was multiplied through others. So they had entrusted it. They were on their honeymoon. So yeah, so it's kind of cool because that's the genius of the charism we feel that God calling us to, is to not just speak and inspire, but to grow people who can speak and inspire others to fulfill the mission of evangelization.
So really, like from the inception, this culture of I have to pour into others so that they can pour into others, and trying to make it exponentially spreading, like that was really in the root of the business or the organization, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
How we approached opportunities and solving problems was always vetted against like, who can we raise up to take that? And if we can raise up someone to take it, then it's a yes. And if we can't raise up, then it's a no. Like it was always around selection and entrustment and multiplication.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just like the next generation mindset was very much part of our culture from the days of campus.
So now you mentioned selection. Like, so obviously you two were very successful in this environment. Are there people who are not as successful in it, or where it's not going to work for them?
Yes. And I think it's because, like you say, like what gets measured gets done. Well, equally, the people root themselves out. Like they become uncomfortable with that culture of accountability and vulnerability and authenticity and being accountable to what you said or what you committed to. So the ones that don't feel like staying, and we may be mishired or misselected, and that can happen. Obviously, some it's for beautiful reasons, like other calls and other movements, and others it's a discomfort. Yeah, with what they're being invited to. So there's not always like a huge need to sit down and have like, the hiring and firing, if you will, isn't as strong because the culture is strong. So it takes care of that. And like, Kelly kind of said to you, I don't know if we were already recording, but she came from corporate. She's standing at one of the big conferences and she sees CCO there, and the leader's holding a Starbucks cup. He's a dad. He's talking about what he does. And she's getting in one flash a sign that, okay, wow, this organization values leadership, values success, and they're kind of cool. So she saw that all mixed in together. And that is what draws people to coming to work with us, is that there is a high standard. We sometimes think high standards scare people away, but it doesn't. It's actually like very attractive to know that we're going to live out what we're committing to, and we're going to hold you to standards.
And that's awesome. But that's what we have to do. If we want people to act a certain way, we can't come down to how they're behaving. We have to bring them up and in a supportive way, but bring them up. So it's awesome. So do you have a criteria for leaders, like selecting leaders? And so can you talk about that a little bit for us?
Yes. And so as the director of formation, this is like the criteria across any program, any demographic. So we're talking like university student leader to coaching a parish to select leaders to a diocesan director of how to look at their staff. It's faithful, available, contagious, teachable. So F.A.C.T, FACT, we call it. Faithful is meaning living a Christ-centered life. Like Jesus is not just a part of my life that I think about, but he really, I've invited him to be at the center, and I'm figuring out what that means to live my life with him as Lord. It doesn't mean perfection, but it means a life of surrender. Available means someone who is showing signs of willing to make time for something. This does not mean available in the sense of just the retired people, when we think about parish, or just the student who's always hanging around, like we have to really look at, are they willing to make time? Contagious is like a really big factor for us. So you might look on the offset and go, well, what do you mean? Like, do you mean just cool people, like the football guy and the cheerleader? Like no, actually what we mean is someone with their own personal magnetism. Like people are drawn to spending time with you. People are drawn to being authentic with you. And our staff are a spread of colors and strengths and personalities, because you can be magnetic and contagious and people can be drawn to you, and you can be very quiet. And that's actually very contagious. People like spending time with you. And there's others, that are more what we call sanguine, outgoing and generous and funny. And you have to be contagious. And that matters across any leadership, because if you fail to pick that criteria, or you just skip over it and think it doesn't matter, it can sabotage all of the others, And then teachable is being willing to show up with your strengths, but be directed in how to spend your time in the given program. That you might not know everything, that what you have might be awesome, but there might be more that we have at play in this movement or in this setting. And that is really hard to find sometimes, is that we have volunteers who are faithful, available, contagious, but really not teachable. Spending time on leaders and growing leaders is really important, and you don't want to like waste it on someone who's not.
Yeah. So how do you either, like, what do you do with that? Do you try to develop it to a point, or you just say, well, I'm sorry, you're not?
Well, we don't select. Like if it's obvious on the offset and we're like Kelly said, that subornos, that praying, we pray as a team. If I'm working in a parish, I'm praying with the priest or the 3 or 5 people about the 30 people that they're looking at. And we really try to get to a place of unity on the 5 people they all feel really are these things. And there is fighting that happens, and there is, but this person, this, and this is all really important, because what we're teasing out is what they value. And what we're teasing out is what they see and don't see. And we're offering our expertise of the indicators of these things being at play. So we do teach that. We do come into that. We do offsites or look or meet and greets to help confirm their selection. On campus, yeah, we for sure make mistakes, but we spend a lot of serious, important, prayerful time, because selection is like, you pay for that all year long. So, you really, we pray, we watch, we spend time, we invest, and then we invite people into leadership. And it is an invitation. We are clear with what it means. We are clear with what we expect from them. We ask, would you be open to being accompanied, in mission and in holiness? Is this something you want? So that it's all free and intrinsic motivation based. It's not contrived. And some people will say no, but we'd rather them say no, knowing fully the gig, than asking later for little pieces of time and little pieces of strengths that they never had. Like, it's just uncomfortable for everyone. Yeah.
Well, that all makes sense. So that's awesome. But so I love that there is a process for it, because like selecting leaders, selecting employees, even for people, is difficult. And to have just, here's the standard. This is what we need to be successful. I think Patrick Lencioni talks about a humble, hungry, smart. So It's similar, right? Like the teachable will be humble. So it's very similar in that. And it's necessary for the type of work. So. All right. So I know you mentioned earlier, Holly, that you guys just redid the mission of CCO. So what's next? What's exciting at CCO?
Yeah. So in CCO right now, we feel like a lot of movements globally, very drawn to the 2000th anniversary of Jesus's resurrection, which is 2033. So in 2023, we prayed and leading up to this in a very synodal way, but we launched a 10-year vision up to 2033. And it's to activate multiplying leaders towards Jesus's Great Commission. And this is something, you see reflected in our new mission statement that I shared, is across many areas of investment. So of course, across our staff, across campuses, and across what we call beyond, meaning partners, alumni, associates, and other movements. Mm-hmm. So as we've started to step into this and put language to it, it wasn't just an idea, it was putting words to stuff we were doing. And I now see just such an acceleration of our charisms and our approaches to ministry, intentional accompaniment, globally. I was on a call this morning with a movement in Vienna. We're in meetings with a movement in Scotland and Ireland. My founder is in Australia right now for a few weeks. There really is physically, globally, things happening where our mission is spreading. But also we see leaders raising up within these movements, desiring to work full time with us or spread CCO wherever they are. And those are signs to me that Kelly and I would have heard about and dreamed about when we were younger. And the mission statement said, for the renewal of the world. And we would have been yeah, we're doing this to raise up leaders on campus. Mm-hmm. Well, now I'm 40 something years old and I'm meeting with these leaders that are already engaged in the renewal of the world. And we're offering our genius, this little leaven inside of these amazing things they're already doing. And I can see the explosions around me firsthand. And it's an honor. It's just such an honor to be touching so many ministries globally.
That's awesome. So are there any types of ministries you're searching for, or what is it that you guys are trying to find? Is it just anything and everything, or is there a focus to that?
People that are working in evangelization. So a lot of people that have tried alphas, are running alphas or running small group faith studies or Bible studies, formed, divine renovation, people that are stepping into evangelization and maybe are encountering I've got a lot of people and I don't know what to do about it, or I'm nervous that I'm too full of too much activity and I need to do something. Our genius of intentional accompaniment comes into play because we begin by selecting leaders with you and helping you organize yourself in a way to have a next generation of leaders. And so that's where our campus wisdom, the Lord is allowing it to spread over and inform, and organize really, really structured multiplication in all of these places for evangelization.
That's awesome. Super cool. So if somebody wanted to reach out, a parish or an organization wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way? What's the contact? How do they do that?
Yeah. So if it's a parish or diocese, it's parish@cco.ca. Otherwise, our website is really directed towards youth in Canada or internationally who want to bring CCO to their campus. So that's just cco.ca. And we have a lot of intake forms there for that.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been so wonderful for me to hear, because I love to hear and see what it looks like, because it does take a long time to develop it and it's pouring into people. And it's that culture, and that culture it almost becomes self-sustaining when you've got all these practices going on. So it's exciting for me to see, and it's been wonderful to talk to both of you, because just hearing your experiences and getting to know you, it's just been amazing. So thank you so much
for having us. It's a real pleasure.
Really good.
Awesome. And for my listeners, I hope you found this hugely enlightening. And if you want to engage in any of the resources, please reach out to CCO. And if you love this episode, please share it with a friend, leave a comment, a review, because that's just how we get the word out. So thank you so much. And we will see you on the next episode of the Business Building Blocks podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Business Building Blocks podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. If you found value in our conversation, please leave a quick review, or share. It helps us reach more amazing listeners like you. For more resources and insights, visit KristinaSchmitt.ca, where you can find tools and support to empower your leadership journey. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.